To work with all the objects in core data, we need some things, some classes, objects. One is the data store. This is how the file is stored somewhere, somehow, by iOS, in a file or something. Then in the middle is the persistent store coordinator. So we'll have to create an object of that and provide where the data store is. Now there are two things, managed object context. This would be a specific role that we are working on at any given time, a specific employee, a specific employee evaluation. Manage object model. Now that would be all the entities or tables, employee table, employee evaluation table. So that's how these, and this one of course is going to refer to persistent store coordinator. Manage object context is also going to be referring or use or based on persistent store coordinator. So that's how they talk to each other. And also in constructing them, we would need to know where the data store is to construct this one and construct this one based on this and based on that. Now I'm going to analyze this code that was generated and see what objects are created and in what order. Okay, in the app delegate, I am going to shut this one down, open the assistant editor. There is a managed object context, manage object model, NS persistent store coordinator. Three objects defined here, and then synthesized and right in the did finish launch with options is trying to set the managed object context to self.manage object context. So let's see what that one does. It's going to call a method. There we go, you see. There's a method called managed object context. And it's going to see if it is null. If it's not null, it's going to return it. And for the very first time, of course, it's going to be null. So it's going to jump over and it's going to do three things. And it goes in this order. First, a managed object model is created. Then, based on it, a persistent store coordinator is created. Then, based on it, managed object context is created. So I came in here to create this one, and it needs the persistent store coordinator. And I'm going to try to create that one. And that one is going to call the next method. It's going to do the same thing. If it's not equal to run, return it. Otherwise, it's going to do a number of things. A NSURL, and we're going to give it a name, discard me2.sqlite. Whatever the project name is, that's the name of the XData model. And you just look at this one, drop the XData model and add SQLite. So that's what we do first. Create an NSError object and call this method just like that. That should initialize it. Actually, this one, persistent store coordinator, needs a managed object model to initialize. So now it's going to jump into the managed object model. Same thing. If it's equal to null, step over it, create NSURL for this resource, same name, no extension, and based on the URL, initialize that object, return it. Now we jump back. Now our persistent store coordinator has been created. We return it, and we have a persistent store coordinator. Now I can create my managed object context, allocate it, and set its persistent store coordinator to whatever I have. So here we go. Managed object context needed this one, and that needed that one. So that's the order of things. I hope that's clear that we have to do. Now once it does it, we are done, and it's gonna jump, and it's gonna, now we have everything in there in the fetched results controller. Now if I go over here, that method is called, it does the same thing, but it's not equal to run null. It's going to create a ns fetch request. We are going to create a ns entity description. We're going to call it is event. If you look at data model, there is an entity called event. So that's what's going on over here. And then fetch request, set entity to entity. Of course, if I want to work with the employee, I should have done the employee. At this point, that's all I need to do. Everything else is created. I could, put in my table name, do this, set the batch size, set the sort descriptor. Timestamp is a column or an attribute in the event right there. That's where that is coming from. Once we have that, set it, set some other properties. We have the fetch request controller, an error object, and perform the fetch. Once it does that, it calls itself, and now we have that. It's going to return itself, and it's already filled, and all the entity object can be controlled by fetch request controller right now. Sort keys have one section by, there are no section names, but everything is in here. If I let it run, in the table view explanation, I have explained this code before in another tutorial. Number of sections in table view. Fetched results controller has a sections attribute, its count. That's how many sections I got. This is just the same with the table view controller. And now we can just jump in. And at this point, use the number of rows in section. We are just working off of the fetched results controller. And that's how we got fetched or selected everything, all the rows in the entity table. That's the technique for selecting. Next, I will look at the technique to add. Every time I click on this one, is again working off of that, and I'm gonna explain that next. How to fetch. Oh, we already did the fetch. How to add, delete entities in a row. Add, add, modify. No, not modify. Add, delete rows in a table or entity. Now I'm going to look at the code to insert data into the database. This plus sign does that. It just adds time stamp in. So I'm going to click on the plus sign. It calls the insert new object method. In it, I'm for the fetch results controller. We just saw that we stored everything in it. We're going to fetch it back out and cast it. The context, the entity was stored in there too. It was called event. Managed object was in there, and the persistent store coordinator was used in the managed object, so that's in there. So we need the context and the managed object. New managed object, set value, ns date for key, timestamp. A timestamp column, just store the date in it. That's all it's doing for right now. Create an instance of the error, context dot save. send in an error. In an earlier tutorial I talked about what's going on over here. This save method expects a pointer to the error, so when we come back it'll have an error, or if nothing went wrong it'll have nil. I'm going to try to I'm going to step over it this time. Now I'm going to step into it. And that's just it. In the context, there's a save method built in there, and it'll just save the entity that we just updated up there. It's all automatic. There was no error. And now we have a, so that's how that's saved. Now the next one is how to delete. So I'm going to give it a shot, try to figure out if that I hit the right object. Edit, delete, delete, and yes. Commit editing style. In this method, they try to delete it. In the template code, if editing style is that, pull out the context. Within the context, delete object. Which object? The one at that index path. Same technique over here, an object, error object, context.save. See, we delete it from context and we call the save all the time, so it already knows something has been deleted and it'll figure it out and do what it has got to do and delete it. So that's how you select, insert, delete. Update would be similar, there's update method, update this object and then save context. So in the next tutorial I'm going to take an existing example based on single view application and add the core data to it, so we can see how to add core data capabilities into a project that did not have that already. So that would be interesting.